Please don't scroll. Not because I need attention, but because this part of winning is almost never talked about. People see the trophies, the headlines, the numbers that make the story look clean. What they don't see is how quiet it gets when you're the one expected to win. How loud the world is on the outside, and how silent it becomes on the inside. Winning changes the way people look at you. Not slowly, all at once. Suddenly, every move feels watched. Every mistake feels permanent. And every success feels like it belongs to everyone but you. They call it pressure. They call it greatness. They call it legacy. But what it really is weight. A weight you don't get to put down. A weight you're supposed to carry without flinching, without explaining, without showing what it costs. Because once you start winning, people stop asking how you're holding up. They only ask how much more you can give. And the strangest part is this. The more you win, the less room there is to be human. You're allowed to dominate. You're allowed to endure. But you're not allowed to hesitate. This is the part no one prepares you for. Not the grind. Not the sacrifice. The silence that comes with being expected to always be strong. If you're still here, then you already know what that silence feels like. Winning doesn't make the pressure disappear. It sharpens it. The higher you climb, the smaller the margin becomes. There's less room for error, less room for rest, less room for excuses, especially the ones you never make out loud. People think discipline is loud. They think it looks like intensity, like fire, like obsession. But real discipline is quiet. It's choosing the same hard thing when no one is watching anymore. It's showing up when the applause has already moved on to someone else. Expectation doesn't knock. It settles in. It lives in how you train when you're already tired. In how you push when your body is asking for relief. In how you stay sharp because you know slipping isn't an option. Because once you win, you're no longer competing against others. You're competing against the version of yourself people remember. And that version never gets tired, never hesitates, never needs space. So you learn to carry it alone. You stop explaining why you're still working this hard. Why enough never feels enough. Why slowing down feels like letting everyone down, even yourself. There are rooms full of people and still you feel isolated. Not because no one is there, but because no one is carrying what you're carrying. They see the routine. They don't see the restraint. They see consistency. They don't see what you had to silence to maintain it. And over time, you realize something uncomfortable. Discipline separates you. It makes you reliable. It makes you respected. But it also makes you alone in ways success never warns you about. You don't talk about it. Not because you can't, but because you're not sure anyone would understand. So you keep going. Not louder, just deeper. At some point, winning stops being enough. Not for you. For everyone else. The same people who once believed in you start watching differently. Not with curiosity, with expectation. They don't ask who you're becoming. They decide who you are. You get reduced to moments, clips, headlines that leave out everything inconvenient. One mistake becomes a definition. One bad stretch becomes a verdict. And the strange part is, no one tells you when the shift happens. You don't get a confrontation. You don't get an argument. You get distance. Messages take longer to come back. Conversations stay on the surface. Support turns conditional quietly. People don't leave loudly when you're winning. They fade. They protect themselves with silence. They justify it by calling it realism. They say they're being honest, but honesty would require staying, asking questions, sitting with complexity. It's easier to label you, easier to simplify you, easier to talk about you instead of to you. And when you notice it, it's already happened. You start carrying more alone, not just the work, the doubt. You replay moments in your head, not to blame anyone, but to understand when belief turned into distance. You wonder if you changed, or if winning just made you useful until it became uncomfortable. Because there's a moment every winner faces, when being admired turns into being evaluated, and evaluation is cold. It doesn't care how much you gave. It only cares whether you're still delivering, so you keep showing up. Not because you feel supported, but because stopping would mean letting the story end without you. And even then, no one asks how it feels to realize that some people were never standing with you. They were just standing near you while it was working. There comes a point where quitting would make sense. Not because you're weak, but because you've already proven enough. Your body is tired in ways rest doesn't fix. Your mind stays alert even when you're supposed to shut it off. Pain stops feeling like an interruption and starts feeling like routine. People assume staying means confidence, that you're fueled by belief, by certainty. The truth is quieter. Staying is often a negotiation with yourself. Every day, every night. You ask questions you don't say out loud. How much longer can I carry this? What am I still trying to prove? And to whom? But walking away has a cost, too. One that doesn't show up on the surface. Because when you've built your identity on showing up, leaving doesn't feel like rest. It feels like erasing yourself. So you stay. Not out of pride. Out of responsibility. Responsibility to the standard you set. To the work you already poured yourself into. To the version of you that refused to stop when it first got hard. You learn to function inside discomfort, to perform while managing pain, to smile without explaining what it takes just to be there. And over time, the hardest part isn't the physical toll, it's the emotional one. Knowing that the longer you stay, the fewer people are willing to stay with you. Because staying exposes things. Limits, commitment, fear, and not everyone wants to confront those while watching someone else do it. So you carry on, quietly, deliberately. Not because it's rewarded, but because walking away would cost you something worse than exhaustion. The sense that you abandoned yourself when it mattered. Somewhere along the way, without planning to, I realized something. You're still here. Not cheering, not judging, not asking for anything. Just listening. That matters more than you think. Because most people don't stay once the story stops being clean. They stay for results, for highlights, for certainty. But you stayed for the quiet part. You stayed when there was no lesson being taught, no victory being promised, no moment waiting to be clipped and shared. And that tells me something about you. It tells me you know what it feels like to give more than you get back, to carry something heavy without being asked if you can still hold it. You know what it's like to stay committed when recognition fades, when understanding becomes optional. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I just want you to know that your presence is rare. In a world that moves fast, that reacts louder than it listens, choosing to stay is an act of patience. And patience is something winning slowly removes from people. They want conclusions. They want certainty. They want to know how the story ends before they decide whether it's worth their time. You didn't do that. You stayed without knowing where this was going. And that's not nothing. That's proof that connection doesn't require answers, just attention. And for someone who spent years being evaluated, measured, and reduced to outcomes, being listened to, without demand, is its own kind of relief. There are questions that don't show up when you're chasing something. They wait. They surface when the noise fades, when the routines slow just enough for your thoughts to catch up with you. You start wondering things you never had time to ask before. Did people believe in me, or in what I was producing for them? Was loyalty real, or was it convenient? Did I demand too much, or did I simply care more than most people were willing to? Those questions don't come with answers, at least not clean ones. They sit with you. They follow you into moments that are supposed to feel satisfying. They whisper when the room goes quiet. And the hardest part is this: winning doesn't protect you from doubt. It just delays it. You can outrun exhaustion, you can manage pain, you can push through pressure. But doubt waits patiently. It shows up when you slow down long enough to feel. When you realize that being strong for a long time can quietly teach people to stop checking on you. You learn to measure your words, to edit your thoughts before sharing them. Not because you're hiding, but because misunderstanding has a cost. And over time, reflection replaces explanation. You stop trying to be fully understood. You settle for being accurate with yourself. Not every misinterpretation needs correction. Not every silence needs to be filled. Still, the weight accumulates. Because carrying questions without answers takes its own kind of energy. You don't resolve them. You coexist with them. And maybe that's part of winning no one prepares you for. Learning how to live with uncertainty without letting it harden you. Without letting it turn curiosity into cynicism. Or commitment into distance. You keep going. Not because everything makes sense, but because stopping would mean pretending those questions don't matter. And they do. Hope doesn't arrive the way people expect it to. It doesn't show up as confidence. It doesn't sound like optimism. It's quieter than that. Hope is what remains after you've questioned everything and still choose not to shut down. It's choosing to stay open even when experience has given you reasons not to. You could become distant, protective, careful in a way that keeps everyone out. And sometimes that feels safer. But safety has a cost too. Because closing yourself off doesn't just keep disappointment out, it keeps meaning out with it. So hope becomes a decision, not a feeling. A decision to keep listening, to keep engaging, to keep believing that attention can still be intentional. That presence doesn't have to come with conditions. You don't need applause for this kind of hope. You don't need agreement. You don't even need understanding. You just need proof that not everyone is here to extract something and move on. And that proof is often small. A moment of patience, a quiet message, someone who stays without asking where this is going. Those moments don't fix the past. They don't erase the weight. But they remind you why you started in the first place. Not to be admired, but to be connected. To push yourself toward something meaningful, even when the path is unclear. Hope doesn't promise that things will get easier. It just says they're still worth facing honestly. And sometimes, that's enough to keep you moving forward. There isn't a clean ending to this. No final lesson. No moment where everything settles into clarity. Because real endurance doesn't wrap itself up neatly. It stretches, it lingers, it stays with you long after the noise fades. There's a point in every long journey where you realize you're not tired of the work. You're tired of being misunderstood while doing it. That realization doesn't arrive dramatically. It comes quietly. After years of explaining things to people who stopped listening a long time ago. After noticing that the questions being asked aren't curious anymore. They're strategic. Not why does this matter to you, but what do I get from this? And once you see that shift, you can't unsee it. You start choosing your energy more carefully. Not because you care less, but because you finally understand the cost of caring deeply in spaces that don't return it. This isn't bitterness, it's calibration. It's learning when to speak and when to let silence do the work. Because silence, when chosen, isn't weakness, it's control. There were times I thought strength meant never slowing down, never hesitating, never admitting the weight. I was wrong. Real strength is quieter than that. It's continuing without needing to be seen, without needing to be agreed with, without needing the story to bend in your favor. It's staying aligned with who you are even when the version of you people prefer is easier, simpler, more convenient. If you've stayed this long, you already understand that. Not because our lives are the same, but because the feeling is. The exhaustion of trying to do something meaningful. The isolation that comes with commitment. The quiet pride of not walking away even when no one would have blamed you for it. This isn't about winning anymore. It never really was. It's about staying human in environments that reward results over honesty. And right now, we don't need to resolve that. We don't need to label it. We don't need to turn it into something inspirational. It's enough to acknowledge it exists, to sit in this moment. Without noise, without performance. Just two people sharing the understanding that endurance is rarely celebrated while it's happening. And yet, here you are, still listening. That's not nothing. That's proof that presence still matters, that attention can still be intentional, that meaning doesn't disappear just because it gets quieter. There's no conclusion here, only continuation. And sometimes, that's the most honest ending there is. Knowledge it exists, to sit in this moment, without noise, without performance. Just two people sharing the understanding that endurance is rarely celebrated while it's happening. And yet, here you are, still listening. That's not nothing. That's proof that presence still matters, that attention can still be intentional. That meaning doesn't disappear just because it gets quieter. There's no conclusion here, only continuation. And sometimes, that's the most honest ending there is.